So I'm with an organization called Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. We're an organization that was founded by myself and other former high school and college policy debaters. Policy debate is really important in our narrative as an organization. Policy debate is one of the most rigorous forms of academic debate that exists. In fact, many of the think tanks in our country that kind of shape the public policy agenda, they recruit directly from policy debate. And so our organization was founded by many of us who participated in an activity that had a lot to do with the culmination of the conservative revolution in the 80s, when you talk about the rise of Ronald Reagan. In fact, the Heritage Foundation put out a book in 1997 called The Power of Ideas, where they say they dictated about 80% of the national policy agenda as a result of the influence that think tank had on the public policy process, given the revolution that had happened in the formation of civic and political institutions to build power over time as a response to the Black freedom struggle that came to a head in the 1960s. And so our organization was founded with the idea of having people of and from the communities most directly affected by many of the major issues that have been talked about before me, and to represent ourselves in the public policy arena. And so one of the foundational principles of our organization is the idea that we live in a society structured on racism and white supremacy, and that the people who are most directly affected by it need to be in the leadership of the movements that are put forward to address the systemic and structural issues that exist in our society. And this is foundational. This isn't just merely an academic matter. One of the things that we were able to do as an organization was stop the construction of a $104 million juvenile detention facility that was slated to be built in East Baltimore. We saw that as an investment in the prison industrial complex, which is an arm of institutional racism. We talk about a profit motive in incarcerating people of color, right? And the war on drugs being the government publicly subsidizing the denigration and the dehumanization of Black and brown people in this country, right? And so for us, that principle is central in thinking about how to organize our communities for effective social transformation. And fortunately, we were able to stop the construction of this jail that was primarily led by Black folks of and from the communities that are most directly affected by the prison industrial complex. This is important because all social transformation that has been successful in this country, particularly you talk about Black freedom struggle in this country, what many of you may refer to as the civil rights movement, it was successful because those most directly affected were in the leadership of those organizations. And many of us have been misinformed about the nature of our history and how we even got to the point that we're in. See, unfortunately, we see narratives of a bunch of people that stood up and made their voices heard, and then all these magical changes happen. But I'm here to tell you that it was local, organized, grassroots organizations, regular, everyday folks, that were able to organize in order to produce many of the changes that we see in our society. I'll give you a couple of examples. So many of us are familiar with the abridged version of the Rosa Parks story. You know, she was told to give up her seat to a white person. She refused to give it up. And then as a result of her refusal, this movement kind of just sprang out of nowhere. But what most people don't know is that in 1944, 11 years before the Montgomery bus boycott, she was sent to Abbeville, Alabama to investigate the brutal rape of a Black woman by 6 white men, right? Which is one of many assignments she was involved with as a field organizer for the NAACP. And so what you'll find is that the Montgomery Improvement Association, which was primarily responsible for the Montgomery bus boycott, was led primarily by a woman named Joanne Robinson, who, while Dr. Martin Luther King was the public face of the movement, right? She was organized in the day-to-day infrastructure that had been built up cumulatively through a series of grassroots efforts that had been taking place over a series of time. And so for me, it's important to note that, because when you talk about social transformation, we're talking about the fact that a group primarily made up of Black church women, right, but of just grassroots people in the city of Montgomery, were able to create an alternative transportation system, right, that lasted for 13 months. As a person who's formerly worked in city government, there's city government agencies that couldn't even do that. Second example, that's very pertinent to this question of police brutality. In 1942, Thomas Brodus was shot and killed by a police officer. It led to and sparked a mass demonstration in Annapolis, about 2,000 people, led by people like Lily Mae Jackson, Juanita Jackson Mitchell, Carl Murphy. These are folks that organized a massive demonstration, right? That was, again, sparked by the death of Thomas Brodus. But the agenda was about power and about building power. And so one of the things that I want to leave you with is that given this conversation about police brutality, right, many people have reduced notions of racism to individual bigotry and changes people's minds. But if we look at what the fight for what many of you call the civil rights movement was about, it wasn't about getting people to like you or getting people to be nice to you or sitting next to people of different races. It's about building the power of communities who are most directly affected by racism and white supremacy, the power to determine their destiny and to form the institutions that control their lives. And so the question, when we look at the issue of police brutality, is about building the communal power in those of us who are interested in social transformation to invest in people in their communities, in their neighborhoods. Because when you look at the demonstrations and the protests, these protests culminate into building power. They culminate into public policy change that can have long-term sustainable change. And so the intersection of public policy and protest is a natural one. When we look back to our history and how we got to where we are and the changes that have actually led to substantive change in our society, it is that intersection between grassroots activism, organizing, and protest, and sustainable institution building that has been the formula for social transformation. And we need to go back, look at the blueprint that was laid before us so that we can have a clarity of vision about what's going on today. Thank you.